At times, decision making in Lorcana can be complex. What cards to ink, how to sequence game actions, how to evaluate board states, what cards from your opponent to play around. There are just many aspects that go into playing perfectly. One of the best ways to improve our technical play in Lorcana is to review high-level Lorcana matches and analyse how top players make their decisions. Even if the metagame might no longer be relevant to what is before you at present, principles of good technical play do translate across different formats. Improving your technical play would benefit you no matter the deck, format, or metagame. That is what we will be doing today, by reviewing Game 1 of the Milwaukee Disney Lorcana Challenge 2025 finals between Karsten and Franco, the last DLC of the Fabled metagame.
Casten, the player on the left, is playing an Amethyst Steel mid-range deck. Its game plan generally focuses on controlling the board with efficient characters and singing Strength of a Raging Fire, with a view to using card advantage generated by Doc, Genie Wish Fulfilled, Yzma, and Dumbo to overwhelm his opponent with a groundswell of characters in the later turns of the game. Karsten's list also plays many interesting 1 and 2-ofs, but since we are focusing on technical play rather than deck building in this video, we will discuss those choices another time. The player on the right is Franco, and he is playing the boogeyman of the Fabled metagame, Amethyst Sapphire, or as is commonly known, Blurple. This deck is effectively a large mid-range deck, aiming to play a ramp card on turn 2 and develop mid-range evasive threats that have the potential to draw additional cards with Dumbo. Blurple's endgame consists of having lots of ink, deploying expensive threats like Hades and Elsa's Spirit of Winter to take control of the board, refilling its hand with card draw actions like Second Star to the right and Finders Keepers, and eventually winning the game through generating overwhelming card advantage.
At this point in the metagame, it was generally accepted that Blurple has a good matchup against Amethyst Steel, as Amethyst Steel plays many of the same Amethyst cards as Blurple, but trades the late game of Blurple for more cheap characters that are quite simply not as impactful. What this means is that for Amethyst Steel to win, it must aim to play aggressively so as to prevent the game from reaching the later turns where Blurple is advantaged. And with that, we are ready to analyse the game. Casten goes first, he inks Captain Hook and plays Diablo. Logical, as Blurple does not play many cheap characters for Captain Hook to trade into, and Diablo can maintain card parity if banished. Franco draws for turn, inks Tipo and passes, signalling he has another ram card to play on turn 2.
Karsten draws for turn, quests with Diablo, he inks his Raja and he plays Calhoun. It makes sense, you ink your inkable 2-drop which is unlikely to be played within the next 3 to 4 turns to play your uninkable 2-drop. Franco draws for turn, he inks into the Unknown, and he plays the Tipo that he telegraphed that he had from his play the previous turn. He then takes a beat before deciding to put Elsa's Spirit of Winter into his Inkwell. A fine play. Elsa's Spirit of Winter is expensive and uninkable, which makes it a fine candidate to be put away into the Inkwell by Tipo.
Karsten draws for turn, he inks Genie Satisfied Dragon and he plays a second copy of the same Genie. He then quests with Calhoun because Tipo cannot trade into it, and after some consideration, eventually decides not to quest with the Diablo. I believe the reason for this is to preserve his character count for Strength of the Raging Fire, as singing Strength with your 3-drop to banish Blurple's 4-drop while deploying your own 4-drop on turn 4 is one of the most effective ways Amethyst Steel can get to a big board lead early. While he does not have it in hand on this turn, it still makes sense not to quest here and just give the Diablo body up to Tipo in the event that you do draw it within the next couple of turns. On Franco's turn, he sings 1 jump ahead with Tipo, netting him 1 more ink. He then inks his Dumbo and then plays Madamim Elephant bouncing the Tipo. Notably, Franco also has Genie Wish Fulfilled in hand, which is another 4-drop he could have played, but in my view, he played this turn perfectly. By playing the 3/7 Elephant, he is essentially playing around Strength of a Raging Fire banishing his 4-drop, which may happen if he plays Genie Wish Fulfilled or Dumbo, which puts him very far behind on board. And since he cannot deploy Genie safely as yet to take advantage of Dumbo's ability, it therefore makes sense to ink Dumbo. On Karsten's turn, after quite some thought, he opts to now quest with Diablo. This is probably to bait the Elephant into challenging Diablo, since the Elephant is effectively locking down his entire board. If Franco takes the trade into Diablo with his Elephant, Casten may be in a position to take out the Elephant in favourable trades, which he now sets up by playing another Genie Satisfied Dragon, inking Mr. Smee. Notably, he also has Dumbo in hand, but he chooses not to play it. This is likely because he wants to play the larger character that can survive a challenge into the elephant. On Franco's turn, he plays Genie Wish Fulfilled from his hand, draws, and after seeing what he draws, inks Tipo, which is a useless card at this point. Elephant then takes out Diablo. It is an interesting question whether or not to challenge Diablo with Elephant, but since the traits on board would only leave Casten with 2 Genie Satisfied Dragons at 3-1, which Franco's Genie Wish Fulfilled can take out favourably, it is a reasonable play. It is worth noting at this point that Franco has another Genie Wish Fulfilled in his hand, a Hades that he can play the next turn, and 2 more cards in hand. He is also on 6 ink while Casten is on 4 ink, and Casten only has 2 more cards in his hand and has only gained 3 lore up to this point. If he can make it out of the next couple of turns without falling too far behind, Franco is in a commanding position to take this game. Karsten draws Giant Cobra for turn, and his hand is now Giant Cobra, Dock, another Dock, and Dumbo. He decides to ink Dumbo and plays Giant Cobra, discarding one of the Docks to Giant Cobra's effect to gain 2 lore, and plays the other Dock, drawing 2 cards. This is a good play as it is the most ink and card efficient play available. Another option would be to play Dumbo and ink a Giant Cobra, but then he would be stranded with 2 Docks in his hand. His play allows him to gain value from the extra Dock by discarding it to Giant Cobra, gaining 2 lore, leaving him with no cards in hand when he finally plays the last Dock. A very efficient turn. As regards the trade, Karsten spends a long time deciding whether or not to trade into the elephant with 2 Genies and Calhoun, eventually deciding to do so. It's easy to see why he hesitates. As we have discussed, while he eliminates the pesky elephant, he is left with his 2 Genie Satisfied Dragons at 1 willpower, one of which can be eliminated by Franco's Genie Wish Fulfilled already on board. If Franco is able to eliminate Casten's last Genie Satisfied Dragon with a character like Elsa, Belle, or Hades, he can no longer contest Blurple's evasive characters and has effectively lost board control. Not a good place to be when you are behind on cards in hand and on ink to your Blurple opponent. Needless to say, it's a bad position for Casten as the aggressor in the matchup. However, you have to play the cards you're dealt, and seeing as he did not draw Strength of a Raging Fire, it's a board simplifying move that he has to make in order to be able to put pressure on Blurple. Franco draws for turn. His hand is now Madamim Elephant, Hades, Genie, another Genie, and Dumbo. It is on this turn that Franco makes his first, in my assessment, minor mistake. As we can see, his hand is evasive heavy, and he is on the cusp of running away with the game with card advantage with his 2 Genies and Dumbo. It is clear he should play Hades this turn on a damaged Genie Satisfied Dragon, banish the other with his Genie Wish Fulfilled, which sets him up to play double Genie or Genie and Dumbo next turn. This line removes the only threat to his evasives on his board, and also eliminates the threat of damage transfer by way of Belle, which Casten has 2 of in his deck. Inking Madamim Elephant is also better than inking Dumbo, as Dumbo has the potential to snowball out of control with the Genie on board and the other 2 copies in his hand, generating more card advantage than if he were to play Mim Elephant bouncing Hades, which in any event might be slightly too slow. What does Franco do? He takes out a Genie Satisfied Dragon with his Genie Wish Fulfilled, makes sense. He then takes a long think, which I've edited out, before deciding to ink Dumbo. And then he pauses for quite a while, appearing to me as if he realizes he made a mistake with his choice of inking Dumbo over Madamim Elephant. And after another long think, which I've also edited out, he then plays his Hades, but on a Giant Cobra instead of the damaged Genie Satisfied Dragon. I suppose intuitively this creates more value by eliminating a 4-4 Giant Cobra over a 3-1 Genie, and also helps protect his Hades from the Cobra. But as I already said, I believe this to be a mistake, as it is probably better to protect his 3-1 Genie Wish Fulfilled already on the board and his other evasive in hand. On Casten's turn, he top decks precisely the card that punishes Franco's play, Belle Accomplished Mystic. Casten's hand is now Diablo, Genie Wish Fulfilled, and Belle. Belle gets to transfer damage from the Genie Satisfied Dragon onto the Genie Wish Fulfilled, removing it, and he plays Diablo with his remaining ink and quests with Genie Satisfied Dragon. Questing with Genie is logical, since Hades cannot kill Genie without help, and even if he does get help, Belle can kill off the Hades anyway. After taking some time to think, Casten also quests with the Dock, which, based on the board and his hand, is effectively throwing away the Dock to the Hades for free, just to get the 1 lore. It is not immediately intuitive whether this is correct, but I think seeing as Amethyst Steel needs to play aggressively in this matchup to win, going for the lore here is entirely defensible, especially since the already exerted genie is a higher value target for Franco, which means that Doc may be getting to quest for free anyway. On Franco's turn, as we saw, he draw Elsa 5th Spirit, and the only play that makes sense here is to play one copy of Genie first, see what you draw and decide what to ink, and then maybe followed by a second Genie. He draws Finder's Keepers off the Genie, inks the Madamim Elephant that he kept in hand over Dumbo the previous turn, plays the other Genie, draws Monstro, and takes the free Doc with his Hades. A fine turn. On Karsten's turn, he draws his one-off Timothy Q Mouse to join his Genie Wish Fulfilled in his hand. He plays his Genie and then draws a Calhoun. Now he is faced with a choice. Does he play Calhoun or Timothy with his remaining ink? He opts for Timothy, likely because it presents more law pressure on the following turn with his Genie that's already ready. Then, after some thought, he makes the play of questing out with Belle, Genie and Diablo, gaining 4 law instead of taking the trade of Genie and Belle into Hades. This was an extremely critical decision, which goes against the conventional wisdom of taking good trades where they present themselves. However, it is this play that wins Casten the game. Let's take a beat and think about why. First, by questing out, Casten is threatening to win the game the following turn, since he goes up to 13 law and can quest for 8 more next turn. This forces Franco to deal with his board. However, Franco's present board does not effectively nor efficiently deal with Casten's threats. Hades alone can't banish anything except Diablo, and trading Genie Wish Fulfilled and Hades into Belle is highly inefficient, as he loses a Genie and allows Casten's Genie Satisfied Dragon to banish what's left of Hades while still staying alive. Secondly, even if Franco successfully banishes all of Casten's exerted characters, he is still able to quest up to 17 next turn with his Genie Wish Fulfilled and Timothy Q Mouse, which is very close to winning the game, especially if Casten top decks a Giant Cobra. Thirdly, let's think about why Casten will want to banish Hades in this matchup where he is the aggressor. The most compelling reason would be to prevent Franco from getting to sing second star to the right with Hades and another character. However, the present board state actually makes singing second star to the right extremely awkward. If Hades and Genie sing second star, then Franco only has a Genie left that can challenge, which cannot do anything on this board alone besides banishing Diablo. Further, there are very few cards that Franco can draw that can bail him out of this situation. He would likely need Elsa Spirit of Winter and Into the Unknown, or Monstro, but in either case, Casten will still be able to gain 3, maybe 4 law next turn anyway. All in all, Casten's decision to quest out instead of trading was brilliant, and as we will see, was what won him the game. The lesson to learn here is that where you are the aggressor in the matchup, take your chances to be aggressive where they present themselves, especially if you are able to deduce that your opponent may have some difficulty dealing with your aggression. Moving over to Franco's turn, he draws Magical Maneuvers. His hand is now Elsa 5th Spirit, Monstro, Magical Maneuvers, and Finder's Keepers. We assess Franco's position here, we can see that this game has completely spiraled out of control for Franco, when just 2 turns ago, he was in an advantageous position. As an aside, this is instructive as it shows how minor mistakes can compound by letting your opponent back into the game. But nevertheless, this is the position that Franco finds himself in, and given the amount of time he takes to think about his next play, he realizes that this is the critical turn that will decide whether he is able to win this game or not. What would you do here? Let's consider our options. The first option that comes to mind would be to play Monstro with his 8 ink, challenge and banish the Belle, discard either Elsa or Magical Maneuvers to the Monstro to ready it, have Monstro challenge and banish Genie Satisfied Dragon, have Hades hit the Diablo, and perhaps double quest with his Genies. That will leave him with a 6-1 Monstro on board, his Hades, and both Genies facing down Casten's Genie Wish Fulfilled and Timothy Q Mouse. After that, you can consider inking Elsa so that you are on 9 ink to set up a better Finder's Keepers next turn. The downside to this Monstro line is that Casten can still go up to 17 law next turn by questing with both his evasive characters, which might be risky since, as discussed, you are very close to losing if Casten draws a Giant Cobra. Nevertheless, this Monstro line is definitely one to consider since it removes a lot of Casten's characters on board. What other options might he have? Another option would be to ink Elsa, have Hades hit Diablo, play Magical Maneuvers to exert either Genie Wish Fulfilled or Timothy Q Mouse to exert it, bouncing his Hades back to hand, replay Hades on Belle, and banish the newly exerted evasive character with his 2 Genies. Between banishing Genie Wish Fulfilled or Timothy Q Mouse, I would personally go and banish Genie Wish Fulfilled, Seeing as the way the board is presently set up, Timothy Q Mouse may not have evasive on Franco's following turn, which allows Franco's Hades to be able to hit it if necessary. In this Hades line, Karsten can only quest for 3 on his following turn rather than 4 when we look at the Monstro line, which is an improvement. This Hades line does expose your genies to getting hit for value by Karsten's Genie Satisfied Dragon, though given how close Karsten is to winning on lore, him challenging instead of questing with his genie may not be that bad of an outcome. Minor details aside, the 2 options are clear. You either Monstro the exerted characters on board, or you play magical maneuvers onto Hades. I personally think the Hades line is stronger, but if perhaps you value Elsa 5th Spirit highly, you can opt for the Monstro line and choose not to ink the Elsa. Either way, both options are viable. However, Franco goes for neither. After spending almost 2 minutes thinking, he opts to play Elsa 5th Spirit on Timothy Q Mouse, banishes the Q Mouse with both his genies, banishes the Bell with both his Elsa and Hades, takes another long think before eventually deciding to ink Monstro, and then takes another long pause before deciding to play magical maneuvers to just bounce his Elsa essentially, since none of his characters can challenge the newly exerted genie. You can see on Franco's face that he knows he made a mistake, and it's easy to see why. The board state he ended up with is quite probably worse than what he would have had if he just went for the obvious Monstro play. In this version, Casten can still quest for 4 lore anyway, but now Casten even has the option of trading favourably into both Hades and Genie, taking back the board. At this point, I want to be clear that I am not criticising Franco. It is clear they've had 2 long days of Lorcana, and any mistakes can honestly be chalked up to fatigue. However, I think it's important that we attempt to postulate why this misplay happened so that we can learn from the thought process. If I were to guess, I think he evaluated the board state if he were to go for the Monstro line, and decided that put Casten's lore total too close to victory, and so he searched for alternatives. From there, he either didn't see the magical maneuvers Hades line, or he did not want to ink Elsa or Finders Keepers, so he opted for this instead. However, from Franco's expression as he was going through his turn, I think he also realised that he made a mistake going down this line and probably should have just went for the Monstro line. It's even more tilting when that Monstro that you had inked is staring you right in the face and you think about what could have been. From this point on, the game completely collapsed for Franco. Casten draws Madam Mim Tiny Adversary, plays it, and allows all his characters including Diablo to trade very favourably into Franco's board. Though to be honest, any number of draws would have been good for Casten here. Strength of a Raging Fire, Doc, Elsa, Belle, Dumbo, even Giant Cobra. While it may be obvious to some, it is worth pointing out that on this turn Casten changes his approach from being aggressive with questing to instead opting for full board control, seeing as he has been presented an opportunity to clear the opponent's entire board. As Blurple does not have many cards that help the deck catch back up, this is most certainly the correct play. Casten draws Jafar from his Diablo hit earlier, plays his Calhoun and passes. Now on Franco's turn, he is in a losing position, not because of the lore, but because he has no board. He draws Iago for turn, plays Finders Keepers, and draws Second Star, Basil, and another Iago. Not the tools he needs to win at this point. He inks an Iago, plays the Elsa 5th Spirit, and takes out Casten's Genie. Instead of playing Finders Keepers, Franco should have probably just played the Iago he drew for turn, which with the Elsa 5th Spirit would have stabilised the board, assuming Casten does not have an answer to the Iago. Seeing as there's almost nothing he can draw from Finders Keepers and play for 5 ink that is better than just playing Elsa anyway. However, I think he probably knew he lost control of the game the previous turn and may have just played this turn slightly on tilt. On Casten's turn, he draws Mr. Smee, takes the Elsa trade with his Genie, quests out, and plays all the characters in his hand. He is now on 15 lore, threatening to win the game the next turn. On Franco's turn, he draws a Basil for turn, looks at all the cards in his hand, considers all his options, and turns to the side and sighs. There is nothing he can do, and I think at this point he is ruining his missed chances to take the game. We've all been there. He concedes game 1. So, what can we learn from this game? Firstly, when you are an aggressor in the matchup, find good windows to take chances to be aggressive and put pressure on the opponent. As we saw in the game, Casten played quite patiently in the turns leading up to that decisive turn 9, and where he saw a window where his threats were awkward for the opponent to remove, he took his chance on that turn. Secondly, play the game plan that your draws dictate. We can see this with Casten's play. In the early turns, he played his Genie Satisfied Dragons to be in a position to challenge Blurple's evasives and set up a good Dumbo turn for himself. However, once he drew his Giant Cobra and saw that he was likely losing his 2 Genie Satisfied Dragons in the course of trading for Madam Mim Elephant, he realized that going for Dumbo value was probably no longer on the table this game, and instead inked the Dumbo to get maximum value from his Giant Cobra and Double Dog hand. Third, when considering lines on critical turns, take the time to calculate the end board state of every single option before making a decision, as that could be the difference between a win and a loss. We saw this on Franco's turn 9, where as I speculate, he calculated the Monstro line, decided he didn't like it, but did not fully calculate the line that he ended up going down. If he did, and if he was fresher, doubtless he would have realized that it was actually worse than the Monstro line that he had rejected. So, those are my takeaways from analysing this Game 1. Hope it proved useful to you, and if you like this type of content, please like and subscribe. Bye!